Tonight, the death of O.J. Simpson, the man at the center of the so-called trial of the century.
O.J. Simpson breaking through. 30.
From NFL star to accused murderer. The moments that changed his life and captivated viewers like never before.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
A new promise to make it easier to get into the housing market.
We want home ownership to be a reality for younger Canadians.
The changes coming in next week's budget, plus at issue on whether young voters are listening. And after big backlash, Loblaw promised deep discounts on nearly expired food.
They came out saying basically they made a mistake.
But some customers say they are still waiting.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrienne Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. For so many people, just the name O.J. Simpson instantly takes them back to the so-called trial of the century and a brutal double murder, or back further to an electric NFL running back known as the Juice. Simpson's legacy is long and complex, and it's being sorted through tonight after his death at the age of 76. But one thing that is clear, from cameras in courtrooms to trials as TV dramas, his impact on the U.S. legal system is big. Simpson found fame on the football field in the 1970s, but he found infamy 2 decades later in a white Bronco on a California freeway. And as Cam McIntosh shows us, the murder trial that followed dogged him for the rest of his life.
They won't get him.
From the beginning, he was a star.
80 yards.
A U.S. College Heisman Trophy winner
Breaking through. 30.
who became an NFL legend, a Hall of Famer. Later, a top sports broadcaster
Nobody does it better than her.
who also found success in commercials and movies. O.J. Simpson was a beloved American icon who transcended sport and race, only to lose it all.
He and I worked on the football show for NBC for 4 or 5 years.
Bob Costas was broadcasting the 1994 NBA Final when all the networks flipped to that infamous white Bronco chase. Simpson fleeing police amid suspicions. He killed his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman. Simpson tried to call Costas from the Bronco.
If in fact you're an innocent man, these things don't add up.
He's been impeached.
The following so-called trial of the century split America, already on edge after the Rodney King verdict, further down racial lines. To many, Simpson's case was all about whether a black man accused of killing 2 white people could get a fair trial.
Race itself, well, of course, it really wasn't mentioned in the trial itself as an issue very much. It was sort of the commentary that surrounded it.
Simpson's dream team of lawyers spent months attacking the evidence, including the alleged murder gloves.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
The jury took just 3 hours.
Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder.
But Simpson's name never really cleared. He was found liable in civil court for the deaths. In 2008, he actually went to prison after a conviction for armed robbery. By then, he had long been a pariah and a target of ridicule.
Oh no, O.J. has struck again.
Reaction to Simpson's death, cautious and awkward. Cato Kalin was in the middle of it all. A house guest at the time of the murders, a star witness in the trial. He expressed condolences to the victims' families and Simpson's children.
They lost their father, and that is never easy.
From one of his trial lawyers.
He had a very complicated legacy.
Ron Goldman's father called Simpson's death no great loss. A lawyer for Nicole Brown Simpson's family called him a killer. To the end, O.J. Simpson maintained his innocence, his epic rise and fall, one of the greatest in American history. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Now, back in June of 1994, O.J. Simpson was supposed to turn himself into police to be charged in that double murder, but he didn't show up. And that was the start of that slow-speed Bronco chase. Millions watched it live, thanks to pilots and photographers who followed from above. Jeff Males was one of them.
At the beginning of the pursuit, I realized, wow, this is important. We have this Bronco in our sights, and we can't mess this up. It sort of changed public opinion. It was like all of a sudden, people began to go, hey, wait a minute, maybe he did commit this crime. So there was a change in public opinion that occurred with the slow speed pursuit. And it's sort of altered history in that way.
So Paul Hunter is with us now from Washington. Paul, I know you remember that moment well.
Yeah, I was covering it live on CBC News World as it happened that night, Adrienne. And all we were thinking at that moment was, oh, so he did do it. Like he said, because, you know, he's running from the police. What you had was a super celebrity actor-athlete who everyone was then thinking had basically just murdered his wife and her friend. Now in that Bronco, we learned with a gun to his head and police on his tail. And all anyone's then thinking is, what on earth is going on? Is he going to kill himself live on TV? And why are we watching this? But how can we not watch it as crowds gathered on overpasses to cheer him on? And that was before the glove that wouldn't fit and the verdict that turned it all upside down. Never seen anything like it.
You know, it was a trial about 2 murders, right? But for many, it became about something else.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, the verdict was about race in America. Period. Too many black Americans had been on the other end of these things too many times, convicted when they were innocent for centuries. Here was someone with overwhelming evidence against him, found not guilty. Equally overwhelming was the history of racial oppression in this country, and the trial reminded America that the U.S. justice system is seen differently depending on the color of your skin. Many believe the jury wanted to send a message on all of that, rightly or wrongly. Did it change anything? The U.S. racial divide is as deep as ever, including in the justice system. Simpson himself was as flawed as they come in terms of making that point, but that trial brought with it an audience, and the jury knew it.
Paul Hunter in Washington, thank you. Turning now to another big announcement ahead of next week's federal budget. This one aimed at gaining the support of young voters, specifically those trying to buy a home. Ashley Burke now with what's on the table and whether it will help counteract the country's housing crisis.
Another announcement aimed at winning back millennials and Gen Z.
Many younger Canadians feel that the dream of home ownership is just that, a dream. Our government is changing that.
The finance minister says her budget next week will make buying a new home more affordable.
We want home ownership to be a reality for younger Canadians.
First-time homebuyers will be allowed to pull out more money from their RRSP for a down payment. The limit will increase from $35,000 to $60,000. They'll have up to 5 years to start making repayments, and they'll have 30 years to pay off their mortgage if it's insured, up from 25.
That translates to lower monthly payments.
That's only if they buy a new home, condo, or townhouse.
Why does it have to be a new condo or a townhouse or a home? Why can't it not be a resale? So why limit what a consumer can actually purchase?
Developers and builders say it's to prevent housing prices from going up.
We need to make sure people understand that this isn't going to drive up house pricing across the board, all across Canada and every housing market. No, this is really aimed at spurring new construction.
A new report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer says Canada needs to build more than 1 million new homes by 2030 to close the housing gap. Some say while the obstacles for homebuyers are enormous, these new measures could help.
It will not be a game changer for everybody, but for some it will be another piece of the incremental support they're looking for.
The Liberals hope their budget on Tuesday will help them regain support with young Canadians who are angry about the cost of living and housing. This is the Conservatives lead in the polls and have been hammering them on this issue for months. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Despite all of the new Liberal promises, that Conservative lead has grown to its largest margin yet. Kate McKenna shows us what's behind the momentum.
The next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre in full command of a room of like-minded Conservatives.
Merci beaucoup. Who's ready to axe the tax?
He talked about stopping crime and making government smaller, including lots of digs at the Prime Minister.
Gary Elliott Trudeau famously plagiarized when he said that the government had no place in the bedrooms of the nation. Now, his son wants the government to be in every room of your house and your business.
He also made a soft pitch to those who voted Liberal in the past but don't believe in their current message.
Liberals used to believe in laissez-faire. Let people make their own decisions and live their own lives. Different strokes for different folks. Remember that?
A new poll says the Poilievre Conservatives are again picking up support. The latest Abacus data numbers have them a full 20 points ahead.
So what's been really interesting about the conservative support growth is that it's coming from a wide range of parties. All of them share one thing, and that is they want a change in government.
The Liberals are trying to gain back support. The Prime Minister has crisscrossed the country, announcing billions in new funding ahead of the next budget.
As much as the Liberals are trying to take control of the agenda, demonstrate to people that they have a plan, it doesn't seem to be working to change people's minds.
Conservatives say Poilievre's economic message is resonating.
It's very exciting for Conservatives to finally have that person in place and to charge people who are under 40 and get them going and get them excited.
There could be more than a year before the next election, and as Conservatives work to build on their momentum, the Liberals will be trying to take it away. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Israel says it's ready for an Iranian strike and ready to return fire. Iran holds Israel responsible for an attack on its consulate in Damascus earlier this month. And as Katie Simpson explains, Tehran's expected revenge looms large.
As thousands gathered in Tehran for a prayer ceremony to mark the end of Ramadan, Iran's supreme leader used the moment vowing retaliation after the deaths of several senior Iranian military leaders. It must be punished and will be punished, he said. Iran blames Israel for this April 1st airstrike on the Iranian embassy complex in Syria, which killed several Iranian officers, including generals. And while Israel has not claimed responsibility, it's bracing for a possible Iranian response. Israel is prepared and on high alert, both defensively and offensively, says this military spokesman. The U.S. has been working behind the scenes to de-escalate tensions, the Secretary of State calling his counterparts in China, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and other regional partners.
The Secretary has been making clear to every country that has any semblance of a relationship with Iran that it is in their interest to use that relationship to send a message to Iran that they should not escalate this conflict.
The U.S. also issued a new security alert restricting the personal travel of American government employees and their families in Israel, mainly to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. It comes just a day after President Joe Biden described the Iranian threat as significant.
Our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad.
The top U.S. military commander for the Middle East has now arrived in Israel. He's there reportedly to help coordinate a response to an Iranian attack. A senior American official speaking to journalists said they expect a strike, but that it won't be large enough to draw the U.S. further into the conflict. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
A Russian missile and drone assault has hit a major power plant near Kyiv, knocking out power for millions of Ukrainians. Officials say the coal-fired plant is completely destroyed. Russia also hit the energy grid in other regions. Vladimir Putin called it retaliation for attacks on Russian energy facilities. Ukrainian air defenses shot down less than half of the 42 incoming missiles. At a summit in Lithuania, the Ukrainian president pleaded for more air defense systems from Western allies. Back at home, Ontario is one step closer to declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic, years after it was first recommended. Katie Nicholson now with what that would mean to both advocates and survivors.
After 2 years of steadfast refusal, a change of heart.
I declare the motion carried.
Second reading of the bill.
The Ontario government finally throwing its support behind an NDP bill to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic, bringing it one step closer to reality.
It's an important first step to have the government finally recognize that intimate partner violence is an epidemic.
Let's put some teeth into this, bring it to the Justice Committee, and drill down.
An inquest into the 2015 killings of 3 women made 86 recommendations to end intimate partner violence. Declaring an epidemic was number 1.
It's never too late to make the right decision.
Lawyer Kirsten Mercer represented End Violence Against Women at the inquest. She says words matter.
You can't get the treatment right if you don't have the right diagnosis. And so I think it really matters to name this problem for what it is.
The federal government hasn't made its own formal declaration, but the Justice Minister noted he isn't afraid to use the word.
I use the term epidemic to describe what's going on with intimate partner violence in this country. I take some comfort that 9 months later, the province of Ontario is finally catching up.
A huge difference even.
Many advocates hope declaring an epidemic will force governments to fund more prevention and safety initiatives for survivors. But
it's not that it's, magic words that all of a sudden unlock a door, but I think it's a shift in approach. I think it reflects an understanding of the deeply systemic nature of the changes that are needed.
To me, it shows that people are starting to listen, and maybe we can get more action.
in October, Brian Sweeney's daughter Angie was murdered by her ex. Since then, family and friends have been pushing for change, including declaring an epidemic.
At this point, I'm happy that it's progressing. Are we going to slow down and stop? Don't bet on it.
Katie, you've been leading our journalism on this, and as I listen to it, it keeps occurring to me, what is this legislation going to change?
Well, for survivors, it's acknowledgement, really, that this is a wider societal and systemic issue. So that can actually lessen the shame that many feel. Advocates say this is a clear signal that the governments are taking this seriously. So that could lead to more accountability, possibly more funding. Now, important to note, Ontario and federal governments, they have been putting millions into trying to end intimate partner violence. But the thing is, there's just so much still to be done, particularly in rural areas where there are fewer resources, putting women more at risk.
All right, Katie Nicholson, thank you. Instagram's parent company Meta says it's testing new features to help protect kids against online abuse and extortion. But as Anis Haidari shows us, online safety advocates have their doubts.
Young people on Instagram will face new barriers if they send or receive nude photos. The idea is that temporarily blurring images can prevent abuse and blackmail. But child advocates say Instagram's parent company Meta isn't doing enough.
It really seems like a Band-Aid approach, and the responsibility still rests with kids to keep themselves safe, and there's just so much more these platforms can be doing.
If the app automatically detects a nude, it will prompt users to tap an extra button to see or send it. If they do, the image goes through. In a statement, Meta said nudity protection will be turned on by default for teens under 18 globally, and will show a notification to adults encouraging them to turn it on. Experts point out users can just go elsewhere.
They're going to go to other platforms like Snapchat and Wiz that don't have these kind of current safeguards or regulations, and they're going to start using those platforms.
And there's concerns about how automated detection would work because AI can make mistakes.
Including through sort of a discriminatory overreach into some types of conversation and not others, or sort of a discriminatory approach to content moderation and what images come down or what conversations come down and are flagged and which ones are not.
It's not clear when these features will take effect. Meta has said it's testing them, but researchers point out there's no accountability.
There's no need right now for them to share the data. How effective are these measures? They will 100% be collecting that data, but they don't have to share it with anybody.
One thing isn't blurry. Anyone of any age isn't blocked from sending nudes on Instagram because the app doesn't require proof to say you're old enough. Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
A massive effort is underway to save a stranded orca.
This is probably, the most dangerous part of the whole process.
The details of their risky plan. Customers are demanding Loblaw step up its discounts.
Why do you think it should be 50% across the board at Loblaw stores?
Well, clearly they can afford it.
And how a leafy sign led to a miraculous rescue.
This is, I think, the closest to a needle in a haystack that we can get.
We're back in 2. Baseball star Shohei Ohtani's former interpreter is now facing federal bank fraud charges in the U.S. Ipe Mizuhara is accused of stealing more than $16 million from Ohtani's bank accounts to pay for gambling debts from illegal sports betting. U.S. prosecutors say Ohtani is considered a victim. There's no evidence he knew about his interpreter's actions. There's a new plan underway in British Columbia to save that orphaned whale that's been trapped in a lagoon for weeks. Rescuers are working around the clock to reunite the orca with its pod. Tanya Fletcher now with the challenges of the operation.
For 19 days and counting, the young orca has been swimming alone in this lagoon. The situation getting more dire by the day.
And we're getting closer, but we're not there yet to actually helping the whale, or Quisahayas, out of the lagoon.
Known as Brave Little Hunter, the calf has been stranded here for nearly 3 weeks, ever since her mother died. Since then, several unsuccessful attempts have been made to coax the young orca through the narrow opening under this bridge. Now, the plan is to pick her up and move her.
I think this is probably, the most dangerous part of the whole process is actually capturing the whale and putting it back into its own environment.
First, these large nets will be used to corral the orca into a sling. She may have to be tranquilized. Then she'll be moved, possibly by truck, to a spot where she can be transferred, likely by boat, to a type of net pen. That's where she'll be released back into open waters and hopefully reunite with her pod.
It's unprecedented. For each day that goes by, the lower the chances of having a successful outcome.
Experts say there are a multitude of variables at play, and each one must go according to plan.
The challenges are just gigantic in terms of the size of the whale, the difficulty of locating her relatives.
If all goes according to plan,
still, a success story is not impossible. In 2002, BC and Washington state worked together to save an orphaned orca named Springer. She was ultimately rescued by jet catamaran, the first orca to survive capture and successfully reintegrate into her pod.
Whether we're going to be mourning for this calf or celebrating her success, nobody knows yet. The story is still being written.
It's unclear when this next chapter will be written, though. Experts are hopeful the operation can go ahead within the next week. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
Some Loblaw customers say they're getting a raw deal at the grocery store.
I was disappointed.
The demand for deeper discounts. And Rosie's here with that issue. There she is.
Hey, Adrienne, tonight we're going to talk about Trudeau's testimony on foreign interference.
Every briefing I've ever got from all my intelligence and security experts is that those elections were indeed free and fair.
But did his testimony also raise more questions? Chantal, Althea, and Kelly Kreiderman join me to talk about that and a whole lot more.
Some Loblaw customers want to know why they aren't seeing deeper discounts at their stores. Earlier this year, the grocery giant reversed its plan to no longer offer 50% off nearly expired food. But as Sophia Harris tells us, what you're offered now still depends on where you shop.
Kim Seaver went to his local superstore to check out the deals after owner Loblaw announced it would reinstate 50% discounts on food nearing its best before date. But all perishables here still have 30% off stickers.
I was disappointed.
Why do you think it should be 50% across the board at Loblaw stores?
Well, clearly they can afford it if some stores are offering it.
Back in January, Loblaw lowered its 50% discounts to 30% for perishable food. That angered customers amidst rising prices. So Loblaw backtracked, saying it would bring back the 50% markdowns where they existed before. And in an email to CBC News, the grocer confirms all of the discounts went back to what they were previously, which range between 30% and 50% off in respective stores. When Loblaw announced the initial change, real Canadian superstores were already only offering 30% discounts. So Loblaw says that discount stays put.
I'm at Superstore.
Warren Chapman says his neighborhood superstore previously offered a 50% discount, but changed it to 30% around 5 years ago. He believes Loblaw should reverse that decision too.
Just don't see how they could justify treating their customers at Superstore different than they're treating their customers at their other stores.
Consumers talk to each other, and you can quickly be pointed at as an unfair grocer following unfair practices. And to me, that criticism is warranted.
This professor says Loblaw should offer half-off deals at all its standard stores or risk more backlash.
As a national player, you have to be extremely careful.
Give us the 50% off. We appreciate it.
Chapman and other superstore shoppers hope Loblaw will once again change its discount policy. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, let's break down the week in politics. Rosie's here with At Issue.
At issue this week, the Prime Minister testifies under oath, defending his government's handling of foreign interference and why he still has confidence in Canada's democratic institutions.
Every briefing I've ever got from all my intelligence and security experts is that those elections were indeed free and fair.
But Trudeau also said he doesn't necessarily see all the briefings available.
First of all, these are briefing notes that I never saw. These are briefings for a briefer who then gave a briefing that, as we've seen, may or may not have included all of these things.
What did we learn from the Prime Minister's testimony? What questions remain? Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it down on At Issue this week. Chantal Hébert, Althea Raj, and Kelly Kreiderman, who is in for Andrew Coyne tonight. Good to see you all. Appreciate you being here. Chantal, let's start with you in terms of what you made of Trudeau's testimony, whether it revealed anything to you about the issue of foreign interference and how he and his government have handled it.
I'm going to reserve judgment on how they handled it because someone better placed than me, called Justice Ugg, is going to come down with some sense of what she saw and what she believes. She has access to a lot more information than we do, despite the public hearings. So she's the only person who's seen the entire evidence. Watching it, though, I mean, there was once a movie called Lost in Translation. This, what we saw this week, could be called Lost in Communications. If you believe the version that was presented by the Prime Minister and his palace guard, basically, briefers from the security services would come into a room with prepared notes of a message they wanted to deliver, and then that message was not quite delivered, or was fudged, or at least did not come or carry the urgency that you could read in the briefing notes. If that's the case, if messages do not get to government, I think there is a need to fix the system so that those messages do, in stark letters, get to the Prime Minister and his staff, whoever is in government. But beyond that, it seems to me that there is, from the political side of this equation, a sense that it's possible that the security services are not as aware of the realities of politics on the ground as they should be. And that is also true of the group of civil servants who is supposed to watch the last election. That gap does exist. And we've seen it not from CSIS, but from the RCMP. Remember the Mike Duffy affair? And all those charges that translated into the court saying there's no there. So it's not, or it didn't come across, listening to the Prime Minister and the staff, as a relationship between the security services and the government based on trust and confidence.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, Althea, at multiple times with the staff and with the Prime Minister, there was a real sense that things had to be questioned or critically analyzed in terms of the intelligence they were getting, because they just weren't always confident in what was being told to them.
What struck me was that based on the political necessity, it seems like the Liberal government is changing its tune. Last April, Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, testified when the public debate was about whether or not the Liberals had been briefed about foreign intelligence or whether they were closing their eyes and they were purposely trying not to be informed. She came to committee and she testified. She said, of course, the Prime Minister reads any document he receives. And later, first, everything the Prime Minister receives, he spends a lot of time and most definitely reads. And now it seems like the government needs some plausible deniability. The Prime Minister needs plausible deniability. And the message that he is saying is, I don't actually read everything that is given to me. This is mostly for your information. And if you really want me to know something, then I am briefed by my National Security and Intelligence Advisor. And that is the only way. And he repeated this twice. If they want him to make a decision, if they want him to know something, it is up to her, it's a her now, to brief him. So that's not quite the same thing that we were told a year ago. And it makes me wonder, because as Chantal said, we don't know most of what is actually being discussed. We know a few instances in the public sphere, and frankly, those are issues that are being relitigated that we knew about last spring. It is interesting to me that the government's tone and answer to these questions has changed, and I do wonder why.
Kelly, how are you seeing it from out west? Because you're not quite in the weeds the same way maybe that some of us are, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I think, the Prime Minister is right that there was a different outlook on foreign interference, a lack of attention paid to it in years past, and, had brought attention to the fact that security agencies don't always understand the way politics works. It's true, but I also think Justin Trudeau can do details when he wants to, and in this case, he wasn't necessarily interested in the details. And I don't think anything that we've heard is damning in terms of it being ultimately incredibly partisan, but I do think it shows that the Prime Minister was very slow to latch onto the idea that this could be a major issue. We need to have public trust in democracy and democratic institutions. It would also be nice if the Prime Minister expressed a little more trust in intelligence, even as he casts a skeptical eye to some of what they told him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's also responding, and Chantal, you can respond, but I guess he's also responding to the fact that some of this information was leaked, which also, I think, creates an issue of trust for him because it's obviously coming from people who have seen the intelligence. Chantal?
But again, what we heard from the PMO and from the Prime Minister this week is that some of the information that was leaked seemed to come as a surprise to them.
Sure.
And that goes back to, and it goes beyond not reading every memo. The clip you played basically has Trudeau saying, I did not see those briefing notes.
Yeah.
They were the briefer's notes, and that's not the message or the entire message that was conveyed. But I was also fascinated by something a bit different, and the notion that the government was preparing for Russia to want to interfere with the election. And you kind of wonder, because if you think about Russia and Ukraine, what interest would Russia have in regime change? Back at that point, there is no argument to be made that the conservatives are going to be softer on Ukraine than the liberals would be. Maybe you can try to make that argument now, given the debate on free trade, but that's another issue. But the Prime Minister also seems to think that China would not have a preference. It's a fact that he came to office promoting a closer relationship with China. And it's a fact that until the two Michaels episode, it should have been a clear preference for China to have the liberals in government rather than the conservatives. I'm not saying that was still the case in 2021.
Right.
But to say, I don't know why they would have preferred me and not Erin O'Toole is kind of weird and detached from political reality.
Well, yeah,
and O'Toole was also taking a harder line on China in that campaign. So
yeah, but he also laid out that in 2015, at the very beginning of his testimony, that he did have these big goals in terms of rebuilding the relationship with China. So at the same time that he said that, Chantal, he also said, like, I wanted to develop things with China. Last word to you here, Althea.
I don't think that's surprising, frankly. I think when you bring it back into the context of the two Michaels and the international efforts that the Liberal government was doing to try to, prevent arbitrary detention, it was very focused on China. I don't find that surprising. I also don't find it surprising that they were focused on Russia. I mean, Russia came on the radar because of the meddling in the U.S. election, and we've seen what Russia had done in France. And when you look at the briefing notes, the stuff that's been declassified, they talk about India, they talk about Pakistan. There's a whole bunch of other governments involved in this. I will say that one of the things that struck me was how rarely the Prime Minister actually gets briefed on foreign interference or meets with the National Security Advisor. He's even talking just about 3 or 4 times a month. And that one of the good things that has emerged out of the leaks, frankly, is that there is somebody that travels now with the Prime Minister that is in a position to deliver classified briefings, top secret briefings, to government officials if they need them when they're on the road. It's kind of shocking that it took the leak to have that position on the plane with the Prime Minister.
Okay, we're going to leave this one here. Thank you all. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the latest round of pre-budget announcements.
These are all real, tangible measures that are going to help more Canadians get into the housing market.
Are the Liberals getting through to Canadians? That's next. The Liberal government has already rolled out dozens of major budget measures ahead of next week, the latest aimed squarely at new home buyers.
First-time home buyers will now have 30 years to pay off their mortgage instead of 25. That translates to lower monthly payments, so more younger Canadians can afford to pay that monthly mortgage.
Is the message getting through to young Canadians? What else can we expect in next week's budget? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Althea, and Kelly Kreiderman. Althea, why don't you start us off on this? It's hard to know at this stage whether things are getting through to young Canadians, but obviously the way things are very tailored to Gen Z, millennials and Gen Xers, that Gen Z rather, that it makes a difference, right? That's obviously who they're hoping to influence here.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to how the dial has moved because of today's announcement, but it is very clear that the Liberals have no intention of giving up on young people. Young people, at the time, millennials, helped the Liberals win majority government in 2015. And a lot of the announcement that we've seen in the last week and a half are directed at them. And I will say, I know anecdotal evidence is not data, but I was at the hair salon last week and there is a group of young women, and I've been going to the same salon for like 12, 15 years. And I've never seen a political discussion happen at the hair salon before. And there are young women around 25-ish who, they didn't have all their facts accurate, but are around there saying, you know, I don't like Justin Trudeau, but I heard we're going to get free contraceptive and dental care and that you can use your rental payments for your mortgage. Like, that's not true, but clearly the new advertising strategy of the Liberals is working to reach some people that otherwise have been tuning out the Prime Minister. And that has been, I think, the biggest challenge and continues to be. There are a lot of people who have decided they're sick and tired of Justin Trudeau and they don't want to listen to him as a spokesperson. Yeah. But the fact that you have people outside of the bubble talking about government policy, whether or not it's accurate, and thinking about that in, you know, glorified terms, that is a huge success for the Prime Minister's office. And this is an interesting budget because it is really the last budget that can affect change before the next election. Like, assuming the election is October 2025, that budget will just be about announcements. This budget can actually affect change. So expect a lot of goodies, and it will be interesting to see who that voter coalition, who they think they've lost, they're trying to get back in the fold. That's a good focus group you have at the hair salon, Chantal.
Well, at least they can afford to go to the hairdresser.
Well, no, but these are the people that work at the hair salon.
Those are the people doing the hair. Yeah.
Important to note that. To your point, are they having, well, first, yes, it's going to be an interesting budget, except for those of you who will be in that lockup, because I don't know what more you will find, or the new stuff, the deficit, maybe new taxes on wealth. That takes about half an hour to read, so bring a book.
Go in late.
My advice. Are they having an impact? If you look at the polls, the answer is no, but it's much too early to tell.
Yeah.
And like Althea, I have picked up for people who live outside the bubble, who are not keeping score of this and that announcement, a reaction that is a lot more positive than what you hear inside the bubble. I.e., Justin Trudeau is at least providing a narrative for people to consider rather than just let the other side say how bad he is. So bottom line, this approach is probably better than the alternative. I mean, if you're going to sink, you should try to swim.
Yes.
And this is basically what they're trying to do. I'm not sure it gets them to shore, but the alternative is just sink.
But the bar can't be show us that you've got something left in the tank. Like, the bar has to be it's convincing stuff and we want you, right? Isn't that the bar?
No, I do believe that there is an important bar as show us you've got something left in the tank, because the fundamental question is, do you believe these guys have the energy and the stamina to govern Canada for another term?
Yep. Kelly.
It is a huge switch in terms that they're trying to own a space that I think Pierre Poilievre has owned for 2 years plus. I love the impromptu political polls. I remember when my mom's hairdresser in Red Deer 2 years ago started talking about worrying about her kids ever being able to buy a house, and I knew this housing issue would resonate.
Yeah.
Even in small centers, it was a big concern. And I think gaining that space back from the Conservatives is a really tough challenge for the Liberals. The benefits they have, of course, is they have federal dollars and they have time. As others here have said, they have almost a year and a half still to change the narrative on what's going on.
Are the announcements also, Althea, though, about let's put a bunch of stuff in the window and force the other guy to start having to do the same?
And start having to say what he'd cut, I think, is also part of that
Sure.
equation.
Sure.
Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, was speaking to a small C Conservative conference just a few blocks away from here in Ottawa, and he talked about how he's going to cut income taxes. He wants to move the country towards a path to balance. He wants to, cut government for any new government program. One government program will be cut, but if you're also promising income taxes and income tax cuts, there is no way that he could do that and accept all the Liberal spending that has been put in the window. So I think there's two things. Obviously, they want to box their alternative, but they're also going clearly after NDP support. And, for all those Liberals who've been saying, the government is spending too much money, this is not the Liberal Party I recognize, this is not the Liberal Party of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. The Trudeau government has, for years now, has put those people to the side and has decided to continue to with the spending that they're going after.
And to be clear, a lot of that NDP support that's being lost is now going also to Conservatives. Last word to you, Chantal.
To Conservatives, but it's also replacing Liberals who have gone over to the Conservatives.
Sure.
The polls have been significantly worrisome for the NDP,
Yes.
in the sense that they keep claiming that they're getting the government to do all these things, but they're reaping zero benefit on it.
Yeah.
It's a good strategy also if you're going to be coming with a much larger deficit, to have tried to put in the window everything you're going to get in exchange rather than have all these measures be buried by the lead on the deficit. But I'm still curious to see the taxing side of this budget, if there is one, because no one talks about it, but it has not been ruled out, the notion that some taxes will go up.
Yeah, especially for the very rich. Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you all very much. Kelly, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. And with that, I will send things back to Adrienne. She, of course, is in Toronto.
Thanks, Rosie. Next, a signal for help from a tiny island.
They had been stranded on this island for over a week.
How they were brought to safety in our moment. That clearly is a plea for help made out of leaves created by 3 men stranded on a remote island in Micronesia. So they were there for nearly a week without proper food before the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard got involved. The dramatic rescue and an unexpected family reunion is our moment.
We received a report of some mariners that had gone missing on Easter Sunday. And so we were getting notified 6 days after. There's over 600 islands in the Federated States of Micronesia. This is, I think, the closest to a needle in a haystack. So we needed an air asset. When the C-130 got on scene, they were able to see the word help spelled out in palm fronds on the beach. They had been stranded on this island for over a week. The Navy were able to drop food and water. Turns out they had a hole in their boat and were able to just make it ashore. For the week that they were by themselves, they were just drinking coconut water, but they were in good spirits and there was no injuries or anything. They were just happy to see the crew. I think the best part of the whole story is that we have a member on the Coast Guard cutter that is actually Micronesian, and it turns out he's a third cousin of one of the men that was on the island. I just can't imagine how happy they were to hear their native language, and probably calming for them. We were able to pick them up and part of their boat and bring it back to their originating island.
Big world, small world, and what an astonishingly beautiful island, but without cell phones. The batteries for the radio died. And if you consider it is less than a kilometer wide, one of 600 islands, the aerial search was 78,000 square miles. They were lucky to find him. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.